Hello and welcome to Game Over Ottawa. Sorry, I think we got just a bit of a mistake there on stream. Okay, hello, there we are. That's better. Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Game Over Ottawa. My name is Nick Robinson, and I am very pleased to be joined for a special crossover edition of Game Over. I've got Avry Lewis-McDougall from Game Over Edmonton with us here tonight to talk about a very, very comfortable 5-2 win for the Edmonton Oilers in our nation's capital. Avry, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well, Nick. After Edmonton avenged that zip loss to Montreal, so solid bounce back game for the Oilers in Ottawa tonight.
Yeah, definitely a really, really good result for Edmonton coming off of a pretty big, not a great performance last night in Montreal. Definitely lots to talk about there. Avry, before we dive right into all things talking about this game, I just want to give a special shout out to Hyperdrive Hockey. It's the flagship show of the Game Over Network on the Game Over Network channel, Hyperdrive Hockey, where all things hockey are covered across various leagues in multiple countries. Whatever it is and wherever it is, Max, Daphne, and Kev have you covered for all your hockey news with a steady dose of fun and fan engagement. And you can find Hyperdrive Hockey on the Game Over Network YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts on the Hyperdrive Hockey page at thegameovernetwork.com. All right, let's dive right into this game, Avry. The Edmonton Oilers got off to a great start. What a great goal by Evan Bouchard, just undressing Thomas Chabot, and that really got things off and running for the Oilers.
Oh, it really did. And Evan Bouchard is someone where there's been, ever since he really got to Edmonton, there's been the two camps of you love Bouchard, you don't like Bouchard. You can tell when people sit on Evan Bouchard, but that was probably his best goal as an NHLer by far, going through Chabot, getting to the net, driving hard. And that's what Evan Bouchard, you like to see him do. He's got the offensive flair. He finds a way to score when called upon. I want to see more of that from him. He's shown that, hey, he can be an offensive D-man with a little bit of flair to his game. So I like seeing that. It was a great goal for him to get things going tonight, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they said it. I watched the Oilers broadcast for the game, and I think Jack Michaels said it. It was the first time in Evan Bouchard's career he posted 3 points in a period in a regular season game. So he had a great first, and it was all really started with that goal. Ottawa did find a response, really good goal. Drake Batherson finding Tim Stützle in the slot. Tim Stützle continues to do it for the Ottawa Senators. He's been their best player. After tonight, I'd say he's the guy that has shown up for the Senators in every game so far this year. He was probably the only Ottawa Senator that had a good game in this one. And, Drake Batherson did well to find him in the slot, and Tim Stützle just got sort of lost in coverage from an Oilers perspective and was able to beat Stuart Skinner. But the Edmonton Oilers, it only took them 35 seconds to respond before the captain, best player in the world, Connor McDavid, really started to take over in that game. He found a rebound out in front after a kick save by Linus Ullmark, and then slowly the game really turned to Edmonton's tide after Claude Giroux took a face-off violation penalty, resulting in a 5-on-3, and McDavid scored his second of the game. Avry, let's talk about the two McDavid goals. Just another example of the best players in the league taking over a game for Edmonton.
Oh, exactly. And if you make a mistake with Connor McDavid on the ice, more often than not, he'll find a way to make you pay. We saw him cross 1,000-point threshold against Nashville, and he's been finding ways to continue to get points night in, night out this season. And he's gone back to being more of a playmaker this year, but still, he still knows how to get his goals when called upon. And again, 5-on-3, McDavid scores, and he's showing once again why he deserves to be the best player in the NHL, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from a Senators fan perspective, there was, a few people sort of. There's been a lot of discussion the past couple weeks about Linus Ullmark. Particularly, he just a week ago tonight he had a shutout in Toronto against the Maple Leafs and followed that up with a quite frankly, an awful performance against the Philadelphia Flyers. He wasn't great tonight either, and there was, a lot of fingers being pointed at him on the two McDavid goals just because he sort of kicked one right into the top of the crease area, didn't really deal with it well on that first McDavid goal, and then was a little deep in the net for the second one. But I mean, personally, I look at that and it just, McDavid, right place, right time on the first one, and then, I'm not going to complain too hard anytime Connor McDavid comes down the half wall and just rips one short side on the power play. I don't think there are many goalies in the league that make that save. Just when it looked like early in the second period, the Sens were coming back with a bit of a pushback, bit of a fight back against the Oilers. Another loose play, and McDavid to Draisaitl, and Leon Draisaitl makes no mistake on the breakaway to make it 4-1 Oilers. Avry, good hard work from the Oilers again, I'd say, on that goal to sort of force a turnover and really make the Senators pay, as they often did in the early part of that game.
No, of course, and once again, we see tonight Chris Knobloch and company going with the McDrai line. I know it's a thing that in Edmonton, fans don't want to see too much of McDavid and Draisaitl on the first line because of the balance that is the imbalance is created when those guys are on the first line. You can't deny, when you put them together, these guys are almost guaranteed to find a way to get a point in some way, somehow, just because of what they can do offensively, also defensively. I mean, Leon Draisaitl, a guy who's been in the mix all year for Selke Talk, first play defensively as a forward so far this year. So, great play again, and Draisaitl rarely misses on a breakaway. That was a great play for him again, and like I said, the McDrai line delivered once again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know, as an opposition fan, when I was listening to the pregame and they were saying that the Oilers were going to load up McDrai to come against the Senators, I knew in particular Jake Sanderson and Artem Zub, Ottawa's shutdown pairing, were going to be in for a tough night. They definitely had a tough night. I don't think the Senators really were able to contain those two players for much of the game. It was eerily reminiscent of the COVID bubble and trying to watch the Senators defend hard against the Oilers in that season where they went 0-9 against them. Tonight very much had that same kind of vibe to it. It was a pretty lifeless game, I'd say, after that fourth goal. It was very, very quiet Canadian Tire Center. Not much happened for the rest of the game. The team sort of just traded chances. And no scoring all the way until the later part of the third period, where Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, after the Oilers killed his penalty, sort of came out and scored on a really nice redirection. Good for him to get off the board, Avry.
Yeah, no, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, he's had a tough start to the season, only second goal of the year. And you ask Oilers fans, it's been the big debate in terms of should Nuge be scratched? Should Nuge be traded? Is it time to look elsewhere for his future NHL days? But no, I thought it was a great goal. And also, good hard work by Derek Ryan on that play as well. Derek Ryan sets up that play. He did the majority of the work to get the puck to Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. That was a great play by two guys not named Draisaitl and McDavid.
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of the one of the real shifts where the Senators finally got torched by somebody that wasn't on that top line for the Oilers. The Senators did pull one back late, Josh Norris with a redirection. So if you're looking for a bright spot, if you're an Ottawa fan, it's good to see Josh Norris continue to score here early on. He's been on I'd say a real heater, probably been the aside from Tim Stützle, I'd say he's probably been the Senators' best player the last couple of weeks. He's been really, really solid. And did well to deflect in a Nick Jensen point shot. And that was it for the game, the full 60, and the Oilers win it 5-2. Final shots 31-29 for the Oilers. Avry, any other thoughts on the game? But I would say just probably from an Oilers perspective, that was about as ideal of a road performance and probably exactly what they needed after their game in Montreal last night.
Yeah, no, that was a really great way for them to end the Eastern road trip. But also, too, full credit to Stuart Skinner. He had 27 saves, and we've seen how this year has been a tougher year for Skinner. It's been up and down. I mean, his save percentage, 900. But he needed that kind of game to regain his confidence again. And hopefully that's the kind of performance you see more often, and you hopefully can see it again against the Wild coming up this week here.
Yeah, absolutely. From a Senators perspective, it's, there's a lot of angst right now in Ottawa, just given, the team has had a lot of struggles in the month of November in the past, and it seemed, just a week ago tonight, after that shutout win in Toronto in the Battle of Ontario, that this team had really turned a corner, and it looked like that they were really on the upswing. They followed it up with a really good performance against Philadelphia that they somehow managed to lose. Another loss in Carolina on Saturday, another loss here tonight, and the games aren't getting any easier because the Vegas Golden Knights are coming to town on Thursday and the Vancouver Canucks are coming to town on Saturday. So very quickly the Senators are going to have to get their wits about them again, because if they play like they did tonight, I'm not entirely confident headed into those two games later this week. Senators are definitely going to have to pick it up. Tonight was not a very good showing for the Ottawa Senators. We'll transition now into some more of our season-based storylines here with our two teams. But before we do that, I just want to give a quick shout-out to LaRouche. The Game Over Network is an independent production focused on community, inclusion, and quality people. If you're interested in supporting the Game Over Network, we have crowdfunding options available. In the description of this episode, you'll find a link to our Patreon page, and we're also working on a page through LaRouche, a crowdfunding platform for companies originating in Quebec. For LaRouche, we're aiming to raise $15,000, and if we hit that goal, we'll gain access to government grants that will allow us to employ more people. So if you have any ideas for what you'd like to see as giveaways from these crowdfunding efforts, let us know in the comments on Twitter, Instagram, or our Discord server. Avery, you wanted to talk, you told me pre-game, that you wanted to talk tonight about the Oilers' offense and how they're going to have to step up. And again, I watched the Oilers broadcast tonight. That was a very common thing that they were focused on, particularly a lot of the depth players needing more out of guys like Hyman and Nugent Hopkins. This was a pretty ideal game for the Oilers offensively. They created well, generally outplayed the Senators, but Let's get your thoughts on that storyline, particularly for Edmonton, and where you see things headed right now.
Yeah, right now I think you mentioned the top six. Right now, Edmonton is going to need a little more production for those guys coming in. Specifically from Bud Colson. We saw we had a great game tonight. Bud Colson played really well. Nuge has to step up, but Derek Ryan is someone who I want to see a little bit more of, because I know he's an older player. I know he's pushing 40 years old, but if you can get a little bit more from Derek Ryan, like what you saw tonight, they should be in really good shape, because cup contending teams get production from lines 1, 2, 3, and 4. It isn't a team that gets production from only the top two lines. I mean, heck, we saw in the cup final last year for Edmonton, out of the bottom 6, almost won them the cup. When guys like McDavid and Draisaitl were struggling, we saw how they're getting the production from guys like Matthias Janmark, from Dylan Holloway, etc., etc. So if they could get that back again going forward here to at least end November, they should be in good shape in the Western Conference, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned some of their depth guys. And obviously there's been a lot of focus on Nugent Hopkins and Hyman. Do you think it's going to be something that they're going to have to look to address with a trade, just because they haven't gotten exactly a lot of the returns? I know a lot of people in the fantasy leagues I'm in were drafting Skinner and Arvidsson, hoping that those guys were going to definitely be good off-season ads and definitely give them that sort of secondary scoring. But do you think it's something the Oilers might have to look outside the organization to address eventually?
I think right now, the emphasis right now in terms of trading is going to be more for help on the back end. But I'm confident when it comes to guys like Arvidsson and Skinner. I know Arvidsson was banged up. I think they'll figure things out. Same goes for Jeff Skinner, which is really weird, because it appears, from my end, from what I'm seeing, it appears that Jeff Skinner and Chris Knobloch may not be seeing eye to eye in terms of what's happening, because we've seen more than once Jeff Skinner is on the third or the fourth line when he was brought in to be that guy to play top 6 minutes. There has to be some level of disconnect between Skinner and Knobloch, because it's really weird seeing him once again not sticking in the top 6 Edmonton.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely something to watch there. I wanted to park a couple minutes just to talk from Senator's perspective. He was a guy that featured very heavily in this game because of that, what you talked about early on, the Oilers stacking up McDavid and Draisaitl on a line to come to Ottawa tonight. Jake Sanderson has been, I'd say, his performance this season is getting increasingly divisive among Senators fans and hockey media, I'd say the last couple weeks. Jake Sanderson, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I don't think he's been great the last, I'd say, about 3 weeks. I thought he started the season unbelievably well. I think he had 7 points in his first 7 games, looked great on the first unit power play. But it was as soon as Artem Zub went down injured and he was suddenly stapled to Travis Hamonic, his play took a huge nosedive, and it doesn't look like it's recovered for the Senators, which is, I think, really coincides with the fact that they've taken a step back here in the last couple weeks, because Jake Sanderson just hasn't been the difference maker that he was early on in the season. And I think that's something that's becoming a bit more evident now as the Senators sort of flounder in some of these big games where you've got the likes of McDavid and Draisaitl coming to town. I often allude McDavid and Draisaitl and the Oilers now, it's like the circus comes to town, right? Because I don't know if you paid attention to that crowd there tonight, but it was a very full game in Ottawa for a Tuesday. And, it's a game that the fans are certainly getting up for, and the Senators can't seem to, sort of match up to that. And I think, Jake Sanderson's struggles sort of coexist with that. He hasn't been great. He doesn't have a 5v5 point this year, which is, quite frankly, a horrifying stat at this point as we come up on 20 games played. Definitely somebody that has to be better for the Ottawa Senators. But look, I'm not going to sit here and trash Jake Sanderson, because I honestly, I think the world of the player. I get it sometimes when people are quick to label him as the guy for Ottawa now. I think a lot of people were sort of making that judgment early on in the season when he was sort of pushing them. I'd still say Tim Stützle is the cornerstone piece of the team, but Jake Sanderson is right there with him and should be right there with him. But overall, I can't really defend his play the last couple of games. And obviously, McDavid and Draisaitl is a whole other beast. There are very few defensemen in the league that are going to contain that caliber of player. But I'd say I'm waiting for the stat sheet to drop tonight, because I just don't think it was another pretty one for Sanderson. I think he struggled in Carolina on Saturday, and I don't think he was great against Philly last week. I'd even, say for parts of that Toronto game, he struggled against their top players. It just, I can't bridge whether or not it's just a lack of confidence thing with Jake Sanderson right now, or maybe he just is being overworked and just sort of adjusting to life as a true number one defenseman that faces those kinds of matchups. I think every young player is probably going to have those adjustments and have those difficulties. I'm not sitting here thinking that Jake Sanderson is going to take an epic downturn, but I think, it's normal for a young player to struggle. I'm sure I didn't watch that much of them early on in their careers, but I'm sure, Avery, you can comment that players like McDavid and Draisaitl, when they came in and finally started having to take on the heavy matchups, there was a learning curve, right? And there always is with young players. So I think that's something to increasingly watch with the Senators this year. They got to get Jake Sanderson going again, and whether that's Travis Green shaking up, his D partner, he got some shifts with Nick Jensen tonight, or just, really roll him with Zub and maybe start to give Chabot and Jensen some of the tougher matchups. I think that's something to watch. But definitely, as Ty Smith said here in the chat, I agree. Just keep him away from Hamonic. You know what? Just keep Hamonic out of the lineup at this point. I'd probably agree with that one. Avery, we're going to transition into a bit of a, since this is a dual episode, a crossover episode, I sort of figured it would be fun to look at the similarities between these teams. And I know that's a really goofy thing to talk about, because the Edmonton Oilers are, they're my Stanley Cup pick this year. They were my Stanley Cup pick last year in the preseason. They are, in my mind, the elite of the NHL, whereas the Ottawa Senators haven't made the playoffs in 7 years. But I think that there is some similarity to these two, being that they both don't start seasons well. And it's been like that now, at least the last 2 years, heavily for Edmonton. There's been a lot of focus on how they've started. Give me your thoughts on this Edmonton start now. They seem to have turned the tide the last couple weeks, they were saying on the Edmonton broadcast tonight. Obviously, the games in Toronto and Montreal weren't great all the way through, but give me your thoughts on Edmonton's start to this season.
Yeah, no, I mean, granted, it was better than last year. It's not 2-9-1, so the sky isn't falling right now in Edmonton like it was last year with the panic comments that came out. But you're right, Edmonton historically going back to going back honestly a good 15, 16 years back to the days of when they're running JF Jacques in the first line. They couldn't start off strong in the first 15 games of the season. You're not wrong, but granted, this team is finding ways to win early when they didn't do it. But one thing that people have pointed out in different forms that the Oilers right now this year, they're a tad bit boring in terms of how they win games or how certain games go. The flash isn't there as much. I mean, yes, you're getting moments from McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman. I mean, yes, there are moments where his team is still going to, turn it around and be a playoff team and most likely go deep. But the flash isn't there as much. I think it also goes to the fact that his team is also a little bit slower, considering the fact you lost Ryan McLeod, Warren Fogle, Dylan Holloway. So being a slower team does look like this team is a little bit more boring. But I'm glad this team is still finding ways to win tough games and beat tougher teams. That's a big thing they couldn't do last year. And they're above 500 now in November. And that's a really good sign with American Thanksgiving coming up in a couple of days here.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, what you just said, how the Oilers are winning tight games and they're battling and trying to get rid of the flash. I think that's something we've seen in Ottawa here this year. Is the team's tried to cut down on the flash and the wow factor and just tried to grind out a lot of results. And at times, it's really worked. But then you see the inverse, which is a night like tonight, and they come out totally flat and they just can't seem to shake that. And therefore, the only kind of player that you're noticing is a Tim Stützle. Because he's the only player really trying to drive offense and really trying to make a lot of high-level plays. It's sort of just funny how you try to work that balance sometimes, and sometimes it really works well, sometimes it really doesn't. Like, I watched a lot of the Oilers games in that cup run, and to me, it was particular, like those 3 games where they turned the series around against the Florida Panthers, and watching them, how they just grinded, went out and battled every shift. I think it's very evident that that's what the Oilers aim to do, and maybe they're trying to conserve themselves a bit now for that kind of situation coming up in the spring. But yeah, it's funny. Now there was a lot of talk tonight too about Stuart Skinner because he hasn't obviously started the season well, but important for him now. A good performance like this one to sort of try and build off of that and sort of correct his start to the year.
No, totally. And one thing that people saw him do was he gave up a lot of rebounds. There was too many great chances allowed by him. Tonight he looked calm with the glove hand. He didn't look out of sorts. He looked composed in net. Didn't give a lot of great chances for Ottawa. That's a big thing for him to be successful is calming things down, not allowing a ton of rebounds. And when he does that, he's proven that he can be a starting netminder in the NHL. Maybe he's not going to be the guy who can play 60, 65 games a year, but can he be a starter that plays 50 to 55 games a year? Certainly he can. I really believe he can.
Yeah, absolutely. And he certainly showed during the playoffs that if he flips that switch and really locks in, like he definitely is one of the better goaltenders in the NHL. I definitely bring him, personally, I would bring him to that Four Nations tournament. I think he should definitely be on Team Canada. I know there's a lot of people really skeptical about that right now, but I want to put it out there. Stuart Skinner would probably be my starting goalie for that tournament because he's played in big games and all that, and definitely showed that kind of quality tonight. Because I can't recall too many times in the game tonight where it seemed like he was scrambling a lot or anything like that. And I think that's what I was expecting to a degree based on sort of, a couple of the recent Oilers results and what I'd been hearing from the outside. But Stuart Skinner looked really comfortable tonight. And obviously that's helped when, McDavid and Draisaitl really take over a game and give him a lead to work with. Going back to sort of the starts to the years that the teams have had, it's funny because the Senators got to look at a team like Edmonton. Now, obviously, they're not going to be able to match up that kind of quality that Edmonton has in terms of superstar power, but it's interesting how they both tend to start really slow, and whereas the Oilers eventually, I'd say, as soon as like December hits, they really accelerate and they really take off. I think it was in December and January last year where they rattled off the 16 straight wins, and the Senators typically around this time of year, even if they start okay, really take an epic downturn, and that's going to be key now for the Ottawa Senators, just to make sure they don't fall into that. And it feels to me like this gets repeated on every Game Over Ottawa show by every Game Over Ottawa host, probably every year for the last couple of years. But it's the truest thing that this team just, they gotta avoid falling into a complete tailspin. And I did mention earlier the high quality of opponents that are coming up in the schedule, but it's imperative that the Senators, I think, by the end of by the end of November, are at least 500, because I can't foresee them rattling off 16 wins in a row, a la the Edmonton Oilers. Yeah. Another thing to just cross over, fun thing, Avery, do you how many Oilers games do you get out to? Personal question, like, do you get to many Oilers games on home ice?
Oh, yeah, I'm at about, on average, I would say about 35 home games a year, I would say.
Amazing. Okay, I gotta ask. So I made the trip to watch the Senators in Edmonton a couple years ago. Wait,
Yes.
what is it about the Edmonton Oilers, like at home? I'm waiting for that trip again this year where the Senators do the Western Canada swing, because watching the Oilers on home ice, the crowd, the atmosphere there, what is it about this team that just, the atmosphere there has just been so tremendous, I think, the last couple of years, watching it on TV and being there in person. Like, I remember walking in to the arena and I thought to myself, like, holy, like, this is an NHL arena. And it just seems like a city that's really come really far the last few years and really rallied around their team. And I think it's something that Senators fans should, hopefully learn from as they build a new arena. But, like, break it down for me. What makes it so special in there?
I would say the really big thing is success. That's really the biggest key in terms of why atmosphere is so great, is that this market has been, again, wanting this team to get over the hump for a long time. And when you see this team winning playoff rounds, getting to a cup finals, fans want to support it day in, day out. We saw that during the cup final, how when they were playing against Florida, this fan base didn't give up hope when they were down 3-0. The fans still want to make this an intimidating place. They were loud, they were rowdy. That's a big thing, is that this fan base still has so much hope. And when you have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on the exact same hockey team, it's easy to have that kind of hope and want to support this team and want to go to the building every single night and watch what these two guys can do to put on a show. And it wasn't always that way. I mean, yes, fans have always been invested in the Oilers and going to games at Rogers Place and before that Rexall Place, but before 2015, before the McDavid lottery, before you got Draisaitl, before you got the guys who made up this core, apathy was setting in to the fan base because the decade of darkness, the continued lottery wins and no improvement and continuously being at the bottom of the league, apathy had set in. I mean, the jersey tossing.
Yeah, I remember
I would
that.
go to a few games, and it was you would time it. Okay, when's the jersey getting tossed? What time? Second period, third period. Like, you knew it was gonna happen at some point in like mid 2013, 2014, and you fast forward a decade now, and that mentality has changed. Fans want to come and they want to see what Connor can do, what Leon can do. Now they've got a taste of Cup final again and having deep playoff runs consistently now.
Yeah, and again, I asked this question. I think that's such a great answer, and because I ask it because we're obviously streaming on Game Over Ottawa. This is going to be predominantly Senators fans watching this, and I think again, I haven't like totally doom scrolled Twitter for the night, but I know there'll probably be some comments, like there usually are after a loss like this, about how quiet the building was, how quiet the Senators fans were, and things like that. And again, the vibes are just going to generally be really down because they've gone so high up and so low down so far this season, even though we haven't even hit 20 games yet. But I think Edmonton is such a good lesson for the Ottawa Senators because just, there's so much focus always on the Senators' attendance, again, the volume of the crowd, how engaged they were, so much micro-analysis of the team. Whereas, again, the thing that's going to really tie this all together, like you said, is winning, right? The Senators haven't made the playoffs now in 7 years, and there's so much pressure on this team. Whether they want to talk about it every day or not, they clearly have made a point this year of not setting expectations publicly and not talking about the playoffs and things like that. But the city really craves it the same way Edmonton did during those dark years. And to me, there are just so many similarities between where Ottawa's at right now and those Edmonton teams. And obviously, Ottawa doesn't have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl esque players waiting in the wings. Those are, completely two different game changers. In my mind, they're the two best players in the NHL. But, I think it's such a good lesson about how quickly things can really come together with winning, with success. And hopefully, for the Ottawa Senators' sake, Linus Ullmark is able to sort of right the ship here because I think it's just going to give them that much better of a chance to getting some of that success this year. We're going to start engaging with the chat in just a minute. But before we do that, I want to give a special shout out to the Game Over merch because what better way is there to support something you love than by rocking it as clothing? Game Over's apparel line has dropped with 3 unique designs, and whether you feel the nostalgic pull of our retro skater design, you want to make a statement with our established design, which is currently on sale, or you want to wear your love for goalies proudly with our live and die by the goalie design, or if you just need another coffee to get you through the winter, we have you covered. Our merch is designed by Brady Chalice from Game Over Winnipeg, and use the QR code or links in our stream. And take a look through our apparel store and help us rebuild local sports media in Canada while repping your community. Lots of great Game Over Ottawa and Game Over Edmonton merchandise. We're going to take a look now at some of your thoughts in the chat. Senators fans, very, very vocal tonight. I think it's pretty indicative of how things have been this season. A lot of ups, lots of downs, and tonight's definitely, I'd say, one of the downs. David W. said, great game for the Oilers at the Sens' expense. Yeah, I'd say definitely. I full 60, I think, Avery, you can probably comment on this better. I haven't watched too many Edmonton games this year, but is that pretty an ideal full 60 for the Oilers this year, or as good as a full 60 as they've had?
I would say, yeah, because Edmonton, they've played a lot of great 42, 43-minute games, not very many 60-minute games. And yeah, this was, I would say, easily probably the most complete game they've had yet at 60 minutes. I would say the other one was when they hammered Pittsburgh at home. But yeah, those games have been few and far between. They've played a lot of great games for 45, 46 minutes. This was one of the few 60-minute games, and they're going to need more of those games as we get into December, January, and February.
Absolutely. Ty Smith said, well, saw that coming. After 2 embarrassing losses, McDavid and Dry were going to take out their frustrations on the Ottawa Senators, and they sure did. Yeah, I think I said to myself before the game, like, I would have been reasonably comfortable betting probably my house or anything like that on a good game for McDavid and Draisaitl. Just after I saw that they were shut out last night. I know they both played pretty decently in Toronto, but yeah. It's again, I mentioned it earlier, it felt like that I was getting the just terrible flashbacks of that bubble season when the Oilers went 9-0, and it just felt like McDavid and Draisaitl were on, rookie mode the whole time, and it really felt like that tonight. And Bouchard and Nugent Hopkins scoring too. It's just it was a great showing for Edmonton's top players tonight. Austin Hockey said, GG's Sens. Ullmark looks like a shell of what he was in Boston. What's going on there? Austin, yeah, you look like an Oilers fan, I'm guessing here by the picture. Good God, I wish I had a good answer on what's going on with Ullmark. It's a tough one. I think it didn't help that he was allegedly banged up in the preseason. Only got a couple of games in. He looked good, looked great in the home opener. But then I think the big turning point with Ullmark was when he missed, what was it, about 8 games after that home opener, and Forsberg sort of took the reins for a bit, and Ullmark just wasn't on the ice for a few weeks. I think you've seen the same thing with Swayman in Boston. He didn't get a preseason. So I think both of those goaltenders who are now struggling, right, after being such a great duo, I think they're both looking at life now, not having each other to, bounce off of. I think that's a big adjustment for both goaltenders, and I think you're seeing it in Ottawa with Ullmark, that he just, even though Forsberg's backed him up well and played pretty good, better than I really would have hoped for with Forsberg so far this year. It's, new city for Ullmark. He's adjusting to that, new goalie coach, again, new tandem. I think there are all sorts of things there. But at the end of the day, if you're the Ottawa Senators, you've just committed to paying him $8 million starting next year for that, and I think 4 more years after. So with all the adjustment, you can probably only excuse it so much, especially with the way the Senators have gone through goalies the last couple of years. Again, it's Korpisalo vibes, and that is like the worst PTSD term I think I can throw around for the Senators at this point. But not great. Let's see, who else do we have here? Looks like there, a lot of conversation about people with Ullmark in the chat. And again, what a swing based on the fact that he had a shutout this time last week when I was on here for a crossover episode, and we were sitting there hyping it up. Avery, any other Oilers storylines catching your eye after the game tonight? Anything to look forward to over the next couple of weeks?
Oh, look forward to. That's a really good question. I would say, just from my perspective, stay focused on Leon Draisaitl's defensive play, because we're seeing him truly become a 200-foot player, someone who's worked on wanting to get better on the defensive side of the ice, someone who can create turnovers, create chances, and if Leon Draisaitl if he can be a Selke candidate forward, that would be a really scary thing. A guy who can be a potential 50-goal guy again and be the best defensive forward in hockey, that is a scary thing to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if Leon Draisaitl, he's, I think, now just behind Ovechkin in the league lead in goals after last night. I'm not sure, he might have tied him with after tonight or whatever the case is, but if Leon Draisaitl can score 50 goals, and if he can just put up like pretty good defensive numbers, I think you're looking definitely at a Selke Trophy there, and Leon Draisaitl will definitely throw himself into the Hart conversation if he's doing things like that, even though you've got McDavid there with him. Lot more conversation on Jake Sanderson. Ty Smith saying Sanderson is still young. He's going to go through these growing pains. He does need a stable partner like Zub to help him through it. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And again, my sort of point in that second phase of our conversation tonight was not at all to pile on Jake Sanderson. Again, I'm such a huge fan of the player, and he's such a good young player. But again, I think this is the first time we've really seen Jake Sanderson go through any kind of growing pain, because I think we've been so used to him adjusting to life easily in the NHL. He's been so good since he came in. He's been at all times, I'd say he's been better, exceeded everybody's expectations pretty much at every point. This is the first time that he's really dealing with those kinds of pressures. But the Senators definitely need their other D to continue to step up, like we saw with the Oilers tonight. They didn't have Darnell Nurse in the lineup. They slotted Josh Brown in, and the Oilers went with 7D, and it worked for them. They defended really well against the Ottawa Senators tonight. Avery, any other last thoughts on our game tonight before we say goodnight to everybody?
I would just say that this is the offense that Oilers fans want to see. They're expecting to see more of a team finding ways to get 5 goals and hopefully continues into the next game against Minnesota here coming up on Thursday.
Yeah, that'll be an exciting one for the Oilers fans, as the current Hart Trophy favorite, Kirill Kaprizov, faces off against the Edmonton Oilers. So that'll be one to watch for sure. The Senators are back in action this Thursday at home against the Vegas Golden Knights. Yes, the games do not get any easier, but I tell you what, the Senators are going to have to play a lot better than they did tonight. I want to thank everybody for joining us here tonight on Game Over Ottawa, and I want to thank Avery for coming over from Game Over Edmonton to chat. Avery, great to chat with you about the Oilers. Always nice to get some insights on the team that I've been, hopping on the bandwagon of the last couple of times in the playoffs. And obviously, always a treat to watch, like I said, the circus come to town and see McDavid, Draisaitl, and the rest of the Oilers come and play the Senators. Obviously, selfishly hope for a better result tonight, but a really comfortable win for the Edmonton Oilers tonight. That's going to do it for this episode of Game Over Ottawa. Saying goodnight to you after a 5-2 Edmonton Oilers victory. Thanks for watching, everybody.